Welcome to Slow News Day. I'm Steve Poikinen. I am here in the heart of Boulder Creek, California, where the flannel shirt is our state flag, the pit bull is our state bird, and cannabis is our state flower. I am lucky enough to be joined this afternoon by independent journalist, contributor at Consortium News, and co-founder of the Unity for J livestream vigils that have been keeping me personally incredibly informed over the last several months. Stoked to have her with us. Welcome, Elizabeth Voss. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming back. The Man, it's been really fucking crazy since the last time that I had you on the show. Uh, we get what appears to be like good news, and then I haven't even had time today to look at the story with the inmate about Julian Assange. But if you had, I would love you to for first to pitch Unity for J, and then kind of give us sort of an overview of where we're at right now.
Sure. Yeah. So Unity 4J basically is just an attempt to create a movement that is not defined politically, particularly, and bring everyone together to support Assange. We started that last year when Assange was cut off by the Ecuadorian embassy from the internet and all communications, bar visits with his lawyer, and uh, as time has gone on, obviously, he's been uh, taken out of the embassy, arrested this April. He's been charged under the Espionage Act. We've gotten reports recently that he's been very ill, and he's in the basically the hospital ward of Belmarsh prison. So there have been obviously a lot of developments over the last year that have made it necessary for Unity 4J obviously to continue. And so but basically our goal is just to help create a mass movement of people. It's not to preach to anyone. It's not to demand that they work for us. It's to provide a platform where people can help if they want to. And it's definitely, it would be a misconception to only focus on the vigils, because the thing is that I think while the vigils are wonderful to bring on some really intelligent people that otherwise have, some of them have not been able to get onto mainstream American news recently because they've basically been disinvited, whether it's because of their support for Assange or whether it's because they're critical of Russiagate. There are lots of different factors in that. But essentially, we've been able to bring these people to a larger audience. But in addition to that, though, we hope that people will not assume that the vigil is over and therefore they should just continue on and do nothing. Our whole goal of Unity 4J is to help encourage people to go out there and be active themselves, to take actions in support of Assange, and foster that kind of activism, I guess.
And that's a point that I try to make when I retweet that stuff, and through that, a couple of the people that follow this show have created templates and have linked to other people who have much nicer templates. But there have been more people going out and hanging posters and hanging flyers as a result of these vigils, and that's what this show does. It encourages action. So the more of that we can have, the better. I can't stress enough just how insane it is that Julian Assange could be fucking dying in Belmarsh prison for exposing the crimes of empire. And John Kiriakou, who I've had on, who I'm having on again here soon, has said it best on the streams, just what kind of legal process he's not going to be allowed to go through and what we're not going to be able to see. And people are under this delusion that Julian Assange is being protected somehow by Donald Trump, and that when he gets extradited, there's going to be this big public airing out of crimes. And I I guess I don't want to know who their drug dealer is because they're doing bad drugs if they think that.
I think their drug dealer in this case would be Q Anon, and I'm glad that you brought this up because I think that it's very important to address this because Unity4J welcomes everyone from, across the political spectrum, but we've noticed and we've addressed many times on the vigils the fact that there seems to be this very, very harmful narrative, especially rampant among Trump supporters, that stems from this QAnon figure. And, co-founder of the Unity4J vigils and the Unity4J movement in general, Susie Dawson, was one of the very first people to actually do a Twitter thread debunking Q within, I think, 6 months of Q existing. So at the time, I don't even remember if at the time Unity4J existed yet, but I remember her going through and debunking it from many different angles. So in addition to that, though, during the vigils, I've brought up the harmful effects of Q many times, and I actively asked our guests, what do you think we can do to help Trump supporters understand, without belittling them, help them understand that this is not realistic? And that's where John Kiriaku's statements have become so helpful in describing an accurate process of what would happen if Assange was extradited, rather than this fantasy narrative that Q has invented.
You're right, and there was Lockheed Martin put out a tweet the other day that was their CEO, and I can't remember her name, but she's at the table at the state visit with Donald Trump and Theresa May, and Lockheed is bragging about this openly, and I saw that and kind of put it everywhere with like trust the plan attached to it. And I think that kind of thing, more than even conversation, but just brutal raw footage of here's your guy with his boss, and that's Lockheed Martin, and you need to understand that, because look at where our military is, look at what we're doing, look at what AFRICOM is doing. There's examples, but I think it's one of those things where you're locked in a cult. Talking doesn't do any good, because your sense of being is being violated at that point. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, and I think that's what's so concerning about Q, is that I've had those conversations with people, whether it's on Twitter or elsewhere, and you're right, it's very, very difficult to get through to them. And I think that's one of the things that makes me the most concerned about it, is the inability to reason with these people, because they do have such a religious type of belief in this. And I think that, once they're at that point, I think it's more like the problem of a psychiatrist, honestly, than a political activist to talk to them. And I don't mean to insult them. Honestly, I think that really is a problem. And they do hold on to the Q narrative with a religious sense of faith, not a political, critical thinking type of understanding. And that they don't understand that they're doing that, and that's the major problem that I see.
Well, and they also don't understand that half of that shit is literally lifted directly from like TV and film. Like it's so cartoonish that, and I have a friend here in town who has said out loud to me that reading Q is what helps him like get to sleep and what helps him find peace at night. And I'm like, okay, guy, I don't know how to explain this, but Donald Trump is not a white hat. Robert Mueller is not a white hat. Look at all of it. When Robert Mueller comes out in his 8 minutes, the first thing he does is he lays out the case for William Barr and Donald Trump to prosecute WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. It's the very first thing he did. If he's William Barr's enemy, or if they're at odds, why is he hand delivering his version of how you go after Julian Assange? William Barr's name is on the extradition order. Like, I don't understand how one of George Bush's, H.W. Bush's war criminal buddies, deep state war criminal buddies, is somehow part of this. It's
Well, it's like Trust Sessions. It's the same thing over again, only now it's with Barr. And the thing I've noticed too is that people do not hold Q and the narrative from Q they don't hold it accountable when it's wrong over and over. So there was a time for a while when Q supporters, whether this was said by Q or not, I don't know, but the Q supporters were convinced that Assange was not in the embassy, that he was in Switzerland, or that he was already in the US and he was safe. There are a lot of different theories that they had that I saw pop up over and over and over again on Twitter. Then we see Assange dragged out of the embassy in cuffs, and nobody says to themselves, oh, I guess Q was wrong, or I guess the Q supporters were wrong. And the same thing with Sessions. Trust Sessions over and over and over again, and that comes to nothing. Nobody questions Q about it. And so I think one of the things that's really harmful about Q, in terms of that religious effect, is the fact that maybe like your friend, it comes from that need for hope. And I call Q hope porn because of that, because it really is something that is not based on any type of factual thinking. It is just out of a need for comfort. And I think that the problem with that, the real danger of that, is not just the potential delusion that those people might then suffer from. And I'm saying this very seriously, it is the real problem that I see is that then you are allowing the Lockheed Martins and the people, the Gina Haskells, the Elliot Abrams, those people that want to torture Assange and have his head on a platter, are not being countered by the Trump base. And that is so dangerous, because the Trump base is, I think, the only quadrant of the public that will have any effect on pressuring Trump and holding him accountable. So that is why, while your friend may well be genuinely comforted by Q, I think what I would say to somebody like that is, your comfort is endangering Assange. It's actively helping Assange be hurt. You're actively, you are being pacified into support of the military-industrial complex that is out there incinerating people in your name. So you have to really take into account the fact that your comfort is hurting people. It's hurting Assange. It's hurting the truth, and it's actively dangerous. It's not just, oh, I don't want to be uncomfortable. And the reason that I get kind of like riled up about that is because it really does remind me of the parent who doesn't believe their kid is abused because it would be uncomfortable to think that, or it's the school principal who doesn't want to believe the kid that tells them that the teacher abused them because that would make their school look bad. Oh, I don't want to think that, so shut up, little kid, go away. And then the next 10 kids that come in could have been, that abuse could have been prevented, but it wasn't. That type of dynamic is what I see happening in Q. It is allowing the abuse of power to continue, and it's totally unacceptable. And I think the people that are deluded by Q do not understand that that's what they're doing. They think it's harmless to have this hope porn. It's not. And that's the message I would want to send to them, honestly.
That's fantastic. It is analogous too. It really is, between the psyche, or the not wanting to recognize the problem for fear of how bad the realization of the problem is. I don't like actively work on this guy every day, you know.
Right,
but when I see him,
I'm talking to your friend as an example. But
yeah. But when I see him, I try to drop a nugget or two. And one of the things that I'm trying to get him to wrap his head around, because he's not a complete idiot, is that I feel the same way about Q as I do about Anonymous, like OG Anonymous, in that they're an intelligence community operation to offer that hope porn, to monitor the people who would be hacktivists, to round up the ones who may be more dangerous, and to keep the rest of them waiting for that proverbial shoe to drop that never fucking drops. And you put out a little bit of verifiable information. You have an operation that seems to be successful. You expose somebody's CEO's, butler's, cousin's fucking bank information, you know? And it lends credibility to it. But at the end of the day, all you're doing is allowing yourself to be monitored, airing your deepest, darkest fucking revenge fantasies to whatever agency happens to be monitoring it, and doing that in real time while dangerous shit, as you said, is happening, while harmful things are being done, and you're giving cover to that, whether or not you're aware of it. It frustrates the hell out of me. It really does.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that one of the things as well about the Q narrative specifically that I've noticed as well is that Q supporters will say, "Oh, but I learned so much information that I didn't get anywhere else." And a lot of times, when they show me what they're talking about, they're stories that actually were aired before Q existed, much less reported on it. So there were stories, for example, about the abuses in Haiti by NGO workers. And then months later, Q drops that as if it's some sort of insider information. It
Right.
was publicly talked about. And I think that people that are underinformed might actually think of that as insider information. And so that creates that sense that you're listening in to somebody who's an insider. And that's a major problem too. And it's not just one story, it's many, many stories that are presented as if you're getting this insider information when really they've been public knowledge for a very long time.
You're
Yeah,
absolutely right about that. I've seen a few people be like, yeah, I never would have found out so much about the Clintons were it not for Q. And it's like there's
exactly.
literally a quarter of a century or more of detailed information about this particular crime family. Like this is not new, you know. But because they're and this is just my thought about it. I could be wrong, but for the older people who are deep into Q, uh, the 2016 election was their like awakening to really exploring the internet. For the younger people who are into Q, kind of the same thing. Like they probably never fucked around with 4chan too much, or it was kind of new, and to them at least. Um, but the one commonality that they would have is believing in what Gordon Dimmick calls mockingbird media up into a certain point. You know, and that point being the fake news, fake news, fake news, fake news. So they go further and further, further to the right because of their Trump supporters, and they wind up in 4chan or they wind up in 8chan as a result. And
Right.
so their only exposure to quote unquote new media has been viewed through the lens of 4chan and 8chan and whatever sites
Right.
they're linking to. And that's all they know about newer media. And I
Exactly.
mean, that's
Yeah.
got to, that propaganda on that level, controlled opposition on that level, targeted manipulation on that level will make you some fucking cult members. And the diehard Hillary crew, the diehard Russia Gators, I think you said this on a Unity for J stream. They're basically the same. And like the main difference, I suppose, would be hat choice. You've got knitted hats for the
Exactly.
Russia Gators, and you've got red hats for the Trumpers. And like that's it.
Exactly.
Headwear. That's what it comes down to.
No, I think that's a brilliant way of putting it for sure. No, because I mean, and that's the thing. It's not just that they're a mirror image of each other in theory. In practice, they're actually believe it, they've come around so far that they're actually starting to believe the same actual lines, like the idea that Trump will bring Assange over to the U.S. in order to pardon him or protect him or something. I mean, there are people who are Russiagate, Maddow believing Russiagators who believe that. And then you have the same exact line being spouted by QAnon people. And not even just that, you also have this idea from QAnon followers. I heard from a friend, I don't watch Q media, much at all,
Right.
but I heard from a friend that there was a particular Q following YouTube channel that had said that the impeachment of Trump was all part of the plan. Trust Mueller. So,
I'm
so
sorry.
that is literally the same narrative that Russiagators have. Please impeach Trump. Mueller's a saint. Let's put him on candles like he's, Mother Teresa or something. Like, yeah. So I mean, it's literally starting to converge, and I absolutely think that they are mirror image narratives. The only difference that I see, and this is what I think is important, that Q people don't seem to understand, is that propaganda narratives can come from 4chan, 8chan. They can be seeded on any independent platform, alternative media platform, or alternative media outlet, just like they can come from Maddow on MSNBC. There is not an exemption from propaganda just because you're on 4chan. In fact, it's the complete opposite. And I think that that's one of the huge blind spots that Q supporters have, is they say, well, the news media hates Q. The news media is telling us all that Q's crazy and all this stuff. So therefore he must be real, or it must be true, or it must be really dangerous to the mainstream media and narrative, the establishment narrative. So therefore, what Q is doing must be positive. And they do not understand the idea that there can be two self-reinforcing propaganda narratives that help each other by hating each other. And that's a huge point that I don't think they understand.
I used to I used to travel around the country doing Renaissance festivals for a living. You'd be in a spot for like 2.5 months out of the year, and then you'd move to another one. And like during that time, I was doing a fair amount of stand up, and I had a bit where I was like, I want to write a book about, and this is back, at the turn of the century. Um, 2001, 2002, I wanted to write a book about legalizing cannabis, but I wanted to write it from 5 different perspectives, and this is the bit. And so that the people on TV would all be agreeing with each other, but arguing it like bitter enemies because there's one aspect or another that they're fighting for, or there's one narrative that they're particularly pushing, and it went over as a bit, but people weren't really drawing the connection that like this is how manufacturing consent works. And then when I yelled it at them, they didn't invite me back to their club. But I had Jared Beck on like a month ago or something like that, and he said we manufactured consent. We manufactured consent before the internet. All they need to do now is manufacture confusion. And that's exactly what that narrative does, where you've got pussy hat liberals, staunch defenders of herself and Robert Mueller, arguing and hating on principle the same people that are saying, go ahead and trust Robert Mueller. This is all part of the thing. They're doing that. They're doing it in real time, and they're so deep inside the narrative that they can't look outside of it for a moment and be like, holy shit, we're getting played.
Yeah, no, and I think and I think it's important to say the same thing as far as political parties, that there's that appearance of division, but underneath that, there is like an evil variety of bipartisanship where the essential points, whether it's pro-war, pro-big business and corporations, like giant corporations like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, Monsanto, Big Pharma, all of that is supported by both parties. And the war, the death economy, supported by both parties. So that's why, and I'm not saying that issues like immigration are not important, but when we fight about whether a wall is good or not, that is an issue where it appears as if there is great division between the Republicans and Democrats, but in practice, nothing will change either way. Like in practice, I don't think Trump's going to get his wall. In practice, I don't think the Democrats are going to get what they pretend to be fighting for. And I think the reality, as you're saying, is that neither of them are actually fighting for what they say they are. They're fighting to maintain the status quo.
And what's hilarious is that when I witness this so many times, where the counter argument for the person advocating the wall is to show them all the clips of Democrats advocating for very similar things and doing similar practices, and nobody stops to be like, well, shit.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't sink in because the programming says attack, and divide, and attack and divide, and attack and divide. And so even though the information is right there in front of them to see, they're so busy looking at it through a red lens or a blue lens that a clear image is never able to be formed. And that's living in a propaganda state. That's living in a country where there's state television that's masquerading as cable news or Comedy Central or what the fuck ever, like being a news channel. Don't get me wrong, I get my news from comedians. It's just the comedians I get my news from admit they're comedians.
Exactly.
I'll take it from Lee Camp. I'll take it from Jimmy Dore, and then I'll go and I'll read you, and I'll go and I'll read Mint Press, and And but we don't have a ton of great outlets, and that's why if you're watching, listening, what have you, if you have a way to support independent media, please go and do that. You know, please,
Yeah.
like,
Well, even if it's not financial, if it's just sharing it on social media, that also does
absolutely,
help because it's fighting against the censorship that is rampant against independent news for sure.
yeah. And right after George Galloway gets fired, because Steven Crowder gets yanked off of YouTube, thousands of other channels went. I don't know if you're familiar with Crow or not.
No, I'm not.
Okay. He calls this form of censorship modern day book burning.
I would agree.
And that resonates because when thousands of pro Palestinian channels or channels who are trying to broadcast out of Syria to get information out about the White Helmets, which we now know to be accurate, are scrubbed from social media entirely, there's always like Alex Jones or Jacob Wall or fucking Steven Crowder to hold up and be like, but we got a bad guy. You know, sure, thousands of independent voices were silenced as a result of it, but you guys can go sit in your fields and, you know, be okay for a little bit because this one bad guy doesn't have access to this platform anymore.
Absolutely. And I think part of it too has to do with the sense of, I don't know if I'm describing this very well to say it this way, but it's kind of like a sense of a class line as well when it comes to like middle to upper class, pseudo intelligentsia who think that they're very refined and elegant when they say, "Oh, I'm clap clap. I'm glad that Alex Jones was taken off the air because I'm higher class and I am better than watching that stuff." And I'm not supporting Alex Jones here, but I think that that plays into what you're describing, where then we don't hear about the thousands of people that are also censored by the same kind of scrubbing of channels, sites, or the Google changing its algorithms to not show independent news and that type of thing. I think that oh well, I'm intelligent. I get my news from Mad Owl, and therefore it's fine that they censored somebody I don't like. That really does allow so much censorship to happen and be celebrated by the apparently liberal quadrant of society that should be against that. That in a normal situation would be screaming bloody murder about that. So yeah.
And you're right. It's a class based hypocrisy on a lot of levels. But I've had this conversation with people who are like consider themselves to be incredibly far left, but have not realized that there's two sides on that political compass, and that they lean very much authoritarian left and not libertarian left, and that their desire to stifle free speech says more about what kind of policies they would advocate for if they were given a chance, and how they're going to like operate in both their own personal sphere and what they can do if they get any prominence through their chosen careers. And it's really like, it's dangerous. I believe that there should be some sort of process that you have to go to before you're deplatformed. And I don't know exactly what that process looks like, but it's not manufactured outrage culture, it's not call out culture, and it's not tech monopolies.
I completely agree. I think that there are going to be social media networks that develop that are a response to this type of censorship. I think that there's one called MeWe, which is one of the ones that I like.
I'm
There's,
on it, I just don't know why.
Yeah, no, it's I think that right now there are a lot of different people who see the same problem and are creating these different social media websites, and I think a lot of them will fail, but there will be something that becomes a good alternative, whether it's Gab, MeWe, Minds, whatever. I think Steam is a great platform for people that blog and don't want their material to be censored because it's on blockchain, so it will not be censored. even if you're not into cryptocurrency, it's useful just for the lack of censorship on that platform. So yeah, there are a lot of different places that you can take your material if YouTube has censored you. But the problem is when you're somebody who has thousands and thousands of videos on YouTube over the years, and then suddenly they're all gone, that is too late to prevent that type of problem. So I would tell people that are independent media creators to go and put your material, whether it's a blog, a video, whatever, upload it to something that's related to the blockchain, so that it cannot be scrubbed like that, because otherwise you're leaving yourself open to lose all of your material.
That's fantastic advice. I saw Susie Dawson put out a tweet saying that she had lost a bunch of her work. And I've had that happen. I had another friend who I've had on the show a few times who just lost like a 30-some chapter novel that she had been spending about 2.5 years on. She, like, just retired from teaching and getting ready to go travel. And it was her third book. It's not like, but the subject matter that she was covering, I don't know what Susie was writing about. I know what I was writing, but it just seems that there's, you're right, there's got to be like a couple of different places that we back up our material, and I'm bad about shit like that. I really am. The show has a Steemit account. I don't think I've ever used it. I have a Minds account. I checked it like twice. I have a MeWe account. I'm in a couple of groups. I don't know. I don't. The free time that I have, I'm not using to learn those platforms, I guess is what I'm saying. And I probably should, because of the content that I put out and because of the nature of the subject material. So that's thank you for that reminder. I should pay attention to that. I should write that shit down. Get to know your platform.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes, when somebody, like, for example, I know people that have had 30,000 followers on Twitter erased immediately when they are suspended, And so there are lots of different forms that censorship can take. So I have friends who are great activists and they post brilliant messages on Twitter, but they don't have a blog, they're not a writer. And I keep telling them, if you get censored on Twitter, if they suspend your account, all of those brilliant statements you've made are going to be gone forever. You need to write that down. Even if you're just copy pasting the tweet threads into some sort of page somewhere, do it so that isn't lost forever. So I don't think it really has to come down to like, well, every time I upload something, I'm going to go put it on all these different platforms. But definitely make sure that you're keeping a saved copy somewhere that's off of these platforms, because otherwise, it's up to their women discretion as to whether that content will survive or not. And obviously YouTube, Google, Twitter, Facebook, these are not platforms that I trust the intentions of the people at the leadership and at the helm of those organizations at all.
No, it seems that they're getting less and less subtle about wanting to become both government and media at the same time. And I know that this is something that has been kind of loosely discussed. I think Sean O'Brien even said something about it when he was on on the Unity for J stream. And thank you guys for that, because as a result of that, I had him on this show, and he's a fascinating guy, and that's a wonderful thing that he's doing out there. But fuck, I was headed with that, and then I was being nice. I gotta stop doing that. Shit, I really just lost my...
I have that all the time. Yeah, I hate it when that happens on the vigils too. You're in the middle of a question and then you forget where you're going with the question, and it's just, it's a mess. I understand.
Yeah, no, I fucking lost it. That sucks. I'm going to jump to a different subject then, and then maybe if I remember, we'll go back to it.
Sounds good.
What kind of... Okay, so we've had a couple of things that appear to be good news about Julian Assange, and that's
right.
Several of the Espionage Act charges have been dropped. Sweden isn't going to extradite him. Is that like... I'm cynical. I'm conspiratorial by nature, and what that said overall to me is that they're going to focus exclusively on the Chelsea Manning era charges. That they want. That's where they want to funnel their time, money, and resources, and Sweden really isn't that interested in rehashing a case where it came out on a couple of different radio shows that the accuser was either coerced or worked with the CIA, that the charges themselves are fallacious, and Sweden doesn't want to have that mess, and Julian Assange isn't in any kind of health to be able to present a defense. So they just said, okay, we're done. Your problem, go on.
Absolutely. No, I think that we have had some good news. Another piece of good news was that the United States at least said. I mean, I don't really, I don't trust them to hold their promises, but they did say that they were not going to charge Assange regarding Vault 7 and all of that information that WikiLeaks published, which I think is interesting. It's very odd to me that the Trump administration is using material that is old, that we were all aware of under the Obama administration. They're going after Assange for the things that the liberal media supported Assange and Manning on. So they're actually making, even the Maddow's and the Chris Hayeses switch sides over to supporting Assange, even if it's only to support themselves. They're putting them in that position. So it's very interesting. I have no idea why they're doing that, but I think that it is something that in some ways is positive, but obviously any prosecution under the Espionage Act is not positive in and of itself. But the effect of it, of putting every major news outlet onto the side of WikiLeaks, that is a positive result of it. I also was glad to hear about the result from Sweden saying that it would not immediately, request extradition, wouldn't, issue a European arrest warrant. I thought that was great because I think one of the things we were all concerned about was the idea that Assange would be extradited to Sweden with the pretense of facing these allegations, only to be extradited onward to the United States, with the UK publicly kind of washing their hands and saying, oh, well, it was Sweden's decision and not ours. And I'm not taking any credit for this at all, but I wonder if the awareness that UK Home Secretary Sajid Javid was the one who would be responsible for consenting to onward extradition, so that the UK would not be able to wash its hands of that responsibility. I hope that had some effect on just the fact that people were aware that it would not be ultimately Sweden's decision to send him to the United States either way. So yeah, there has been a few good pieces of news like that. We've also had the terrible news that Assange was so ill that he couldn't even speak to his lawyers. I know that everyone is very, very concerned about that, rightly so. And there was a short delay in confirmation of that story, which then had some, there was a bit of a, social media drama about, well, nobody's talking about it, they're not concerned. And then the response being, well, we didn't want to be like concern trolls if this wasn't true or something. So
right.
And that I think really does get to the heart of a lot of the difficulties with supporting WikiLeaks and Assange, in the terms of there are so many fake news stories. There's so much manipulation around the whole topic of Assange and WikiLeaks that if you want to support them, even if you're not like kind of neutral and uninformed, even if you really do want to support them, it is very hard to get to the truth of any story around them, because there is so much bad reporting, misinformation, outright lies, and huge lies of omission, where the real story often just doesn't get even addressed, while a bunch of lies do. So.
And that's the hardest, like, the simplest things to get across are always the hardest, for what the fuck ever reason. And one of the simplest things that you can try to get across to people is this is global governments and all of their intelligence agencies and all of their media outlets saying the exact same thing. Why would you trust that? Like, if you're willing to admit that we live in an era of fake news, if you're willing to dismiss, I think Mint Press said 72% of people have an unfavorable or negative view on Mockingbird's media's ability to disseminate the truth. If you can recognize that, why can't you connect that to these same actors that are bad actors and disingenuous and do horrible things to people are also doing that to Julian Assange?
Yeah, I think that was some timing on the lightning. But yeah, no, I think that that's really an important point. And I think that one of the things that people fail to recognize or fail to act upon is the underlying majority of people. And I'm not talking about the kind of right-wing concept of a silent majority, but I do think that there is a vast public that is either completely disengaged from politics because they don't believe it serves them, they don't care, they just didn't grow up interested in it. But there's also a vast quantity of people who, for example, maybe in 2016, hated Hillary's guts for the things that she did in Libya. From a liberal perspective, there are lots of reasons to hate Hillary a lot, and who would have voted for Bernie, but Bernie was cheated. I think a lot of people, as you say in that poll, do not trust establishment press when it comes to their reporting. And I know that my internet is a little bit unstable right now, but I hope that it's at least somewhat legible. But
yeah, we're good.
Basically, though, I think that it's a situation where those people are kind of feel like there's nowhere to go. I think nowhere to go. I think a lot of them don't have internet like outlets that they trust, and I think the kind of right-leaning part of that quadrant is very vulnerable to Q because they know that mainstream media is lying to them. So then they think, well, this Q person must be telling me the truth. On the left, I think there's just a lot of I don't want to say apathy, but I think there are a lot of people that do support good mainstream, not good mainstream media, good independent media. But then there are a lot of people who just don't know that those outlets exist because there's so much censorship around them. So basically, I guess I'm trying to say that I think that the public agrees with the majority of things that we would say on this broadcast. The problem is that we don't reach the majority of them, and they don't know that there's anybody even saying this. And that. And I'm saying that, I guess, to just emphasize that I don't think the majority of the public is brainwashed by Q. I don't think that they have any sort of ill intent towards Assange. I don't see it as us versus them. I see it as a lot of people that we need to reach, because I think they would agree with us if they heard us.
Yeah, it literally comes down to our ability to get information out and the pushback that we all receive when we try to do it. I have a thought, and it's not necessarily pleasant, but it makes sense in a diabolical way to focus all of your prosecution energy on the Manning era stuff, because Vault 7 exposes the entire fucking scam. And if you prosecute him for that, people have to comment on it. And then you have to give legitimacy to Vault 7, because no one has ever denied any of the information in it. No one has ever gone after WikiLeaks for it. So not only does it have, oh God, what's the nefarious name of that CIA program where they go in and they put in fingerprints and attach it to another country?
Marvel Framework, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. There's that. There's all kind. I mean, the information that was packed within Vault 7 is absolutely not what the Trump administration wants people to have more exposure to. The Democrats, none of them want that information out there. And then it also would make you ask, well, if this is out about the CIA and we know they can do this and they have this technology and they know that we know, what's their new toy? There's no way they kept the same toy. Everyone knows they have that toy now. What's the new toy look like? And then maybe somebody would ask that question. That isn't me, but somebody with a much larger platform. And that's just not, those aren't acceptable scenarios for either side of the aisle, I suppose, to want to argue or to want to have discussed.
I completely agree with you, and I think that's a brilliant point. I think that is something that I think definitely probably goes into the thought process behind that. The only other thing I would add is that It's interesting because even the Manning material that is at issue in these indictments, basically the PR talking points and the arguments made in the indictment itself regarding those 17 Espionage Act charges, it talks a lot about, you know, WikiLeaks putting people in harm's way by publishing unredacted material and all of this stuff. And Joe Lauria of Consortium News did a great job discussing this and pointing out this difference. So in the indictment, they talk about, oh, WikiLeaks put people in danger or whatever, but the charges themselves do not relate to that at all, for one thing. And then the second thing is that whole idea of WikiLeaks putting people in harm's way is an outright lie and did not happen.
Thank you.
It also was the Guardian's journalist who actually basically put the password to an encrypted file in a book, which then forced WikiLeaks to make the unredacted version public, because otherwise intelligence agencies of other countries, the people that, terrorists, people that would be able to find that would find it, and the people named would not be able to respond, to know they had been exposed. So WikiLeaks did the best it could in a very bad situation. The infamous video of them calling Hillary Clinton's State Department and saying, we don't have an emergency, you have an emergency. That was about that leak. So I think that I agree with you that maybe one of the reasons that they picked that to go after is because it's a convenient lie, and because it's a lie, they're not actually exposing anything that the U.S. did. So they're not going after material that would actually, where they would have to talk about war crimes or, unauthorized illegal killings of civilians and all of this other stuff that is discussed in the Manning material. Instead, they're just making up a fantasy, much like Russiagate, to deflect.
Exactly. And that's why they do Russiagate, is because if they went after Trump on anything real, they would all be guilty of the same shit. And there's no way that mudslinging like that over an impeachment wasn't going to land on both parties and get all over both of them. It's why when they go to impeach him, if they do, it'll be a fabricated from whole cloth thing that they know that they're not going to be able to impeach in the Senate. They know that if they go after him and, for anything that they could impeach him for, again, they're just as fucking guilty of it. Just like all of the fucking, just like Vault 7. Russiagate is a response to Vault 7. Isn't it? Didn't the timing about right on that?
No, well, Russiagate was, Vault 7 was published in March 2017. Russiagate really got started just when Trump was elected, which was, December 2017. The initial stuff relating to it started much earlier, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the infamous, former chairwoman of the DNC, was one of the first people to make the Russian hacking allegations because of WikiLeaks' publication of the DNC emails, and then later the Podesta emails. So there's a whole beginning kind of a narrative of that saga that starts before Trump won the election, and then after he won, that's when it kind of went into emergency mode and was really brought to bear in a bigger way. I think one of the things that's kind of similar to that, though, is that, and to go back to why Russiagate was used in the first place, it was used because it deflected from Hillary Clinton and the DNC cheating Bernie Sanders in the 2016 Democratic primary. It was, as you say, an invented narrative about election rigging to deflect from actual election rigging. Yeah. So it serves that exact purpose. And I think one of the mirror images of what you're saying, so like you say accurately, that Russiagate is used by maybe the Democratic Party, because if they actually went after Trump for the things, like you say, that I agree that he's done, then they would be at fault as well. In the same exact sense, only reversed, the Iran scandal is very similar, because you have Debbie Wasserman Schultz at the heart of that, but you have Jeff Sessions and Trump's DOJ not prosecuting her and actually eventually declining to prosecute the Irans at all. And you think, well, that doesn't benefit Trump. He could have gotten like a lot of election points. The problem is that the Irans potentially were leaking dirt on everybody and their mother. So it's like they may, the Republicans and the Trump interest in that administration, or at least, Sessions, may have had like their own self-protective reasons to not prosecute the Irans. So I think that's a kind of mirror image almost of the Russiagate defense.
You're absolutely right. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz's brother was the judge in the Awan brothers case. He was either
I know
the
he
judge
was
or the
I don't think he was
prosecutor.
a judge, but he is a prosecutor.
Okay, that's what he was. He was the
Yeah.
prosecutor in that case. So he was the one who would bring the charges and argue against them in court. And there was no conflict of interest there. Nobody asked Debbie Wasserman Schultz's brother to step away from that case. Not Jeff Sessions, not fucking Donald Trump. Nobody. Like, it baffles me that, and again, it's information suppression. But like, Tim Canova's not shy about sharing this information, but because of how smeared Tim Canova has been, and how just royally fucked over he's been, and vocal about it, he's coming off as like bitter and jaded instead of, wow, dude, this guy's still swinging. What a fucking fighter, you know?
Exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
But yeah, just how tangled it is. It's why they have to make shit up, and it's why they have to push that narrative so hard, and it's why even though that 72% of people don't have a favorable opinion of the news, they suck it up, because if they went outside of that, people might think they're crazy for getting their news on YouTube or getting their news on Consortium News or wherever. Like the stigma that has been put on independent media, and then the tacit legitimacy it's been given to the people who use their independent outlets to push establishment narratives, is so fucking, it's manufactured confusion. It's fucking, like, it's wild to have to combat every day and live through every day, but from a purely, like, I'm standing away from it, looking down on it perspective, it's fucking just, it's wild.
I completely agree. Yeah, no, it is, and I think eventually I think the censorship is only going to get worse on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and those platforms. I think that, and even Medium. So blogging platforms like Medium have censored people, whether they're left, right, center, whatever. If they're independent media who are countering establishment narratives, they are definitely censoring those people. And the response to that, I think, ultimately will be the growth of independent social media platforms, blogging platforms like Steemit, video platforms like BitChute or DTube or whatever. And I'm not saying that any one of those will be ultimately the successful one, but something will come up.
Right, I agree with that, and I think it's worth mentioning that, like, you can make pirate mesh networks in case, your personal internet is being fucked with. Like, that's and when it comes down and when the censorship that you're talking about hits a peak level, we're going to have to start looking at different ways to get truth out there. I think low tech is a good idea too. I think old school fucking zines might have to be a thing that we do. I think fucking like the flyers that people are currently putting up on Julian Assange's behalf and on Chelsea Manning's behalf. That's what we're going to need. We're going to have to saturate people's consciousness with reality in the hopes that some of it starts to leak in eventually.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that is one of the reasons that Unity 4J has been important, is because it's not about having them sit down and listen to a vigil. It's about encouraging them to go out and do something like that themselves. And it doesn't have to be, and saying that does not have to be, well, you must put out a Unity 4J banner and you must support us. It's just trying to encourage people to do whatever it is that they want to do. Just do something. It doesn't matter under whose banner or no banner, whatever. Just go and do something, because the action is what's important, and that's what has not happened. I think that there are people now that are doing that, but I think overall, no matter how many times I say that on a vigil, and no matter how many times I say it in general, people still don't quite get it. It's like, and I hate to say that, but it's like, they go, oh yeah, I understand it, okay, and then they do nothing. It's kind of like the Life of Brian moment where he says, you're all individuals, and they go back, oh yes, we're all individuals.
We are all individuals.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I really, I wish if I could just say anything, it would be to forget a group and just do something yourself every day, whether it's talking to somebody at a coffee shop, whether it's putting out a flyer or writing a letter to an MP, submitting a letter to the editor, anything. That is what the only thing we can do. So one of the things I'm doing right now, and I'm probably going to publish this later today, is I'm writing a little short Steemit post about how can you help? Because that's the question we get all the time. Well, I
Awesome.
want to help, but I feel powerless. What can I do? So I have said there's no real answer I can give you because everyone's different. But I think that for the people who genuinely are stumped, I'm going to give some examples of things other people have done to just give them ideas so that because there really should be no excuse for not doing something, something meaning anything. But
I couldn't agree
yeah.
with you more on that. That's awesome. And when you have that up, I will share the crap out of it. Um, I have to bounce. I have to run back to my house before I go to work in like 45 minutes. But
Okay.
thank you so much for taking some time today. I really appreciate it. This was a very good conversation, and you summed it up perfectly with do something. That's what we need to get done. So thank you so much,
Thank
Elizabeth.
you. No,
And
that was a great interview. That's like one of the best interviews I've done in ages. So I really appreciate it.
aw, that makes me happy. All right. Well, you can find Elizabeth's Voss writing at Consortium News and other outlets, and you can see her on the Unity for J vigils every Friday. They start at, I believe, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m.
Yeah,
Eastern.
they are 4 p.m. Eastern. Yes.
Okay, I live on the West Coast, so I say West Coast first because I'm, I guess, an elitist or something. I don't fucking know. Um,
I'm in Central Time, so it's all the same to me basically. But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And this has been Slow News Day. I'm Steve Poikinen. Good luck to us all. Stop and call.